Good afternoon. My name is Christine Caly-Sanchez, and I am the Associate Director of the Miami, Florida Jean Monnet Center of Excellence and the European and Eurasian Studies at Florida International University. I am pleased to welcome you today to this 8th Meet EU European Expert Career Panel, which is part of a 2-year grant which we at Florida International University, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the University of Pittsburgh received from the European Commission. Every semester, we organize 2 panels with European business leaders, EU diplomats, EU executive director from non-profit organizations, and others to better advise our students who want to work in a transatlantic workplace and how to be successful when working in EU-US relations. Today's panel is designed for students and alumni who want to work with or for European organizations and companies in the emerging technology sectors, ICT, automation, artificial intelligence, science, research, environmental organization in Europe, the United States, or other regions. But also for everyone who wants to learn about having a successful career in European research organization and want to expect in the future of work in a transatlantic context. Before we begin, I would like to thank the European Commission and the delegation of the European Union to the United States for graciously funding this project, Getting to Know Europe meets EU, and our partners, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of Pittsburgh, the Jean Monnet in the US network, our partners at Florida International University, the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs, the Career and Talents Development at SIPA. And I would like to thank, we are really lucky to have today, Dr. Peter Fatelnig, Minister-Counsellor for Digital Economy Policy at the Delegation of the European Union to the United States in Washington, D.C., for joining us today and open the panel and give us some updates on the digital economy. I want to sincerely thank our 4 distinguished panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us today and advise our students. We are honored to have such distinguished panelists. Today, we will have a truly European panel with experts from France, Germany, Italy, as well as a great moderator. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to him, Paul Griebel, Director of Miami Venture for America. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you to Florida International University and the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence for hosting this event. The Jean Monnet Center is a wonderful supporter of many global initiatives around South Florida, so we appreciate engaging with you. Good afternoon, everybody from rainy and wet South Florida right now. It's we're bearing down for a tropical storm, but hopefully everybody who's participating in the South Florida region is staying safe, staying dry. As Christine mentioned, my name is Paul Griebel. I am the Director of Miami for Venture for America, which is a role that I just started this week, actually. Previously, I was the Executive Director for the World Strategic Forum, which is a global economic conference that is hosted in South Florida every year. We just had it last week, which was a great success, and I look forward to continuing to support that initiative. And I also serve on the board of directors for the World Affairs Council of Miami. So any opportunity that I have to engage with programs such as this, I'm always excited to take the opportunity. I'm excited to moderate today's session. As Christine mentioned, we have some terrific panelists representing very unique and diverse transatlantic perspectives, including Mr. Jeffrey Brown, Science and Technology Policy Executive from IBM, Matthias Haury, Chief Operating Officer for the Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience in Jupiter, and Fernando Nardi, Associate Professor of Hydrology at the University of Foreigners of Perugia, Italy. Before we get to our panelists, as Christine mentioned, we are very fortunate to have some opening remarks from Dr. Peter Fatelnig, the Minister-Counsellor for Digital Economy Policy for the Delegation of the EU to the US in Washington. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fatelnig now, then we'll get to some comments from our panelists. In the meantime, I encourage all of our participants today to start thinking of any questions you might have. You can feel free to share those over the course of this session in the Q&A and chat box function. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Fatelnig. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Washington, D.C. I hope you can hear and see me well. Very good. I appreciate the instant promotion to Dr. Fatelnig, which is not entirely factually correct, even if I would love to accept it. I have built my modest career on only 2 engineering degrees. So let's clear up that one right away. But I understand as well that at the same time I'm talking to an audience which is predominantly engineers or people going to be an engineer. So take pride and value in what you're obtaining there. In the preparation, I realized as well that this is going to be an event where probably a bunch of senior people are giving some advice to a bunch of junior people. I kind of didn't like that approach because I think it's difficult when you talk to people who are in training, in education, in advising them. I think there are a couple of generalities, and some of them I hope they will not be too general. I would like to share in my introduction. But at the end of the day, this is very much a one-to-one business. And I do travel throughout the country and meet a lot of university folks and talk to students. And then the one-to-one is the much more rewarding conversation one can have. So with that sort of bit of caveat, let me launch into a few things which I consider very valuable and which you may kind of apply in the personal way than on your own person, character, on your own career, or whatever you would like to achieve. And the first and most obvious one is know yourself. I think knowing yourself will lead you to a better path to deploy the assets you have. And this is almost like knowing yourself means taking a step back. It's probably the best one to judge yourself as somebody else than you, but that will be difficult to obtain that. But you also need to develop yourself some skills and sensibilities in understanding who you are, where you work best, what your assets are, and how you deploy them best. Particularly for people who are in their formative parts of their career and 25, 30 years old, deploying the assets you have at that moment in time will be the best thing you can do. There are lots of people who spend a lot of time of adding assets or skills to yourself. Certainly nothing wrong, but you know, your first job, you will get on some specific knowledge and experience you can bring to the table. And the better you train for that, the better you will obtain, or the more easy you will obtain the first job. Knowing yourself is, I think there are things like 360-degree assessments you can do. I would highly recommend everybody. There are more fun ways of doing that. You can take up acting as a hobby. It will tell you a lot about yourself and the perception you create with others. So that's certainly one area where everybody needs to I wanted to say excel, but at least to have some success in order to get anywhere in your career and life. The second one is probably even more difficult, is knowing what you want. That's actually a hard one. You will probably have to probe that for many years to come. And many 40-year-olds I know have still no idea what they want. So don't feel discouraged if this doesn't come to you immediately, that it's going to be a tough process figuring out. Most likely it will be a mixture between money and a meaningful way to spend your time. For many, there will be an addition in relation to family. So how do you spend your time? And I would almost like to encourage you to draw a diagram which has your lifespan as the x-axis and 24 hours as the y-axis. How do you want to spend your lifetime? What do you want to do in there? How much time do you spend on family, hobbies, work, sleeping, fun out, or any other vision you have in life? Because it's finite and you can plan for that. So I know these are almost platitudes, but if I give you an example, think about President François Macron. He wanted to become a politician at a very early age, but he didn't jump right at that objective because he knew it's probably interesting to do a few things before which prepare you for that job. So the fastest way sometimes to somewhere is not the direct way. That's what I want to say. So he has worked first for a banking firm because he knew as a prime minister, it's maybe a very good idea if you have an apartment without a mortgage. That's a very good idea. You know, sorting some things in life before you go in politics, very good idea. The same is true for many other parts of what you want to achieve. The third and last part in this introduction I want to focus on, and I'm happy to dive deeper then, is becoming a communicator. I mean, obviously everybody knows that. And I would assume that many of you have already excellent communication skills. Now the question is, can you deploy them in an effective and efficient way? That's a lifelong learning process. And I would encourage you to really work on that orally and in writing. There's so much communication ongoing these days, which is in writing. And to be fair, I mean, I live in a world where the written word is king. I see a lot of scope for improvement in that part of the world. So you can see that I'm changing my script on the fly right now. I wanted to sort of cut short a little bit my introduction and just wrap up with two elements. The one is teamwork, and the other one is the keyword project. Today we all work from home. You see me actually working from home because I'm still testing positive for COVID. That's not normal, frankly speaking. So I think I want you to think critically about the workplace, teamwork, the value of collaboration, and how this is going to work in the next 2 years. Maybe we're not going to go back to 5 days in the office, but I'm afraid we will go back to 4 days in the office minimum. And maybe there will be times when you work on projects and very intensive parts of your work life that you will be 7 days in the office or in the lab or with a team. So there is a balance, a renewed balance we have to find. I'm not sure I know where this is exactly heading in the next 2 years, but it will be uncharted territory. So the better you can figure that, the better for you. And the second one is a project. Unfortunately, in my own life, I have figured out very late in life that nobody hires you for a job. You're hired for getting a project done. So a job is a project. You need to figure out what the project is and how you fit in the solution of that project. And the better you are in breaking down jobs into projects or your work life into projects, I think the more career success you will see. I'm happy to give more examples on many of the things I've just mentioned, but I'm sure my colleagues on the panel would also like to chip in on this and other experiences they have made. So thank you very much so far.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's I think that's you provided some terrific insights there. I agree with a lot of what you said, particularly having an idea of what you want, but also being open to pursuing other experiences to kind of lead you in the direction that you want to go. I think that's terrific advice. I know for myself, it's certainly been a process of getting to where I am. You don't just end up there overnight. So fantastic. So thank you for that. And let's turn it over to our panelists to kind of get things started. I think I'd like to ask each of you to talk a little bit about your education and your work now, and maybe how you got to where you are today, and how your studies led you to on that path to where you are now. And certainly, we're interested to hear about your current work and how it works in terms of the transatlantic context. So let's start with Jeffrey from IBM. Jeffrey, we'd love to hear your thoughts on these topics.
Sure, Paul. And thank you to Christine for the invitation to participate today. I am an American, but I'm a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Transatlantic Master's program. So it's all come full circle, and I'm really happy to participate today. So, you know, as others have mentioned, I'm a science and technology policy executive at IBM in Washington, D.C. For those that are not familiar with IBM, the company, IBM sells its technologies and services largely to other businesses and corporations, but government is a large customer of ours as well. We have around 350,000 employees around the world. And my position really focuses on developing policies around emerging technologies that are developed at the company. And I specifically work very, very closely with IBM Research, which is headquartered up in Yorktown Heights, New York. And they're developing new technologies ranging from artificial intelligence to quantum computing to semiconductors. So I'm not just focused on developing policies around these new technologies, but I'm focused on guiding their implementation and scaling as well. So a lot of my time here in Washington is spent with my internal client at the company, but then also up on Capitol Hill advocating for these technologies and their application, and then also working with the administration and other foreign governments as well. How did I get here? I'm originally from Southern California, but I did my undergraduate at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. But when I graduated in 2008, it was at the height of the financial crisis. It was very, very difficult for me to find jobs and to launch a career at that time. So I actually ended up going to France for nearly 4 years to teach English at a university. And that's what really set me down the path of wanting to study transatlantic relations and being interested in transatlantic relations. So that's how I ended up applying to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill to take part in their transatlantic master's program. I spent time at Sciences Po in Paris and then also the University of Bath in the UK. And I focused a lot on theory around transatlantic relations. There wasn't a lot of application. But I did take one class on lobbying, and then I took another class on emerging technologies, and that really provided the foundation and the interest in what I'm doing now. I used my master's program, and this is a piece of advice that I'd like to impart to all of you, to be really aggressive in doing as many internships and getting as much professional experience while you're learning as possible. You're never going to have the ability to study and not have the pressure of having to earn a wage like you are when you're a student. And so I did internships in Lisbon, Portugal, in Paris, France, and then in Tbilisi, Georgia, in the political and economic sections of the US embassies there. And then, following graduation from the University of North Carolina, I almost immediately landed a job at a transatlantic think tank in Washington, D.C. called the Bertelsmann Foundation, where I was for nearly 5 years, running their projects first on the future of work between Europe and the United States, and then working more and more on technology policy. And that was really the position that provided a base for me to launch a career at IBM in government and regulatory affairs. And even though what I do today isn't necessarily transatlantic in nature, it's still working with governments, it's still working on emerging technologies, and I do still have the odd day when I'm in contact with our colleagues in Brussels, Paris, and elsewhere. So with that, I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Jeffrey. That's a fantastic overview. Thank you for that. Let's turn over to Matthias, the CEO of the Max Planck Institute. Matthias, we look forward to hearing about your background, your experience, your work now, and how you got to your current role.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, Christine, as well. I'm really delighted. I've been engaged in international ventures, I think, for a very long time. I'm originally German, studied in Germany, initially medicine, but then decided actually to switch into science and become a biologist. But even early on, at that time wasn't very frequent, but I got kind of the urge of seeing something else than just the German university environment. And so I was encouraged by a student that I actually met hitchhiking on the highway, just to give you some idea how sometimes life comes together, who told me about a recent Fulbright fellowship that he had and very much recommended me to apply. So I went ahead and applied for Fulbright and actually got a fellowship. Ended up in Birmingham, Alabama, doing a year actually in a PhD program already, even though I just finished my diploma, pre-diploma equivalent, which was a bachelor's in Germany. And from there, I was interested in kind of getting back to Europe, ended up in the Pasteur Institute in France to do my PhD in immunology. And from there, I did another postdoc in San Francisco, UCSF, then coming back to Europe again, working a little bit in the Pasteur Institute, but then moving to Lisbon and launching a new research institute, actually really early on in my career. And that's how I became kind of a science manager, because there I was more forced to kind of start science management and infrastructure building than I wanted, because we didn't have any other choice. And from that, in Lisbon, I stayed, I think, 7 years. And once the institute was more or less running, I felt kind of, okay, time for a new venture. And then I went to EMBL Heidelberg and built a $60 million brand new advanced training center, including with the activities inside, which was another challenge to kind of get me into the training and educational part. And so I can very much feel with all the students that are here, because I've been engaged in trying to help students with career panels and things already for a long time. And after EMBL, I made a stint in Brussels to kind of learn more about politics and work for a international intergovernmental funding agency called COST, Cooperation in Science and Technology. And after 3 years there, the Max Planck Society, which is the #1 non-for-profit research organization in the world, headhunted me and wanted me to kind of get their Jupiter Institute started. This is the only Max Planck Institute outside of Europe. And in 2013, when I came, they just opened the building. And they needed somebody that had kind of a broad spectrum of different background, in addition to kind of a transatlantic cultural knowledge. And I think that's the part that really, I think, got me there, because I had experience on both sides of the Atlantic before. And so my current role, I have to do basically everything that relates to operations. I run all the operational aspects of the building, making sure that now when the hurricane is going to hit us front on, that we are all safe, that we have our generators running, that every of the facilities are in place. I work also with microscopy and other imaging core facilities, like scientists that are really experts in technology. Then furthermore, a lot of political programs. We go to Tallahassee. I also have to do a little bit of lobbying, trying to kind of convince the governor to spend more money into science. And I'm also involved with the German embassy in kind of fostering the transatlantic science relations again. So this is a part, I think, that I ended up with in this international environment, of course, at the end of my career. Now, if you want a little advice, I think that you can see from my CV already, it's pretty chaotic. I did a lot of different changes. I would really encourage you all also to kind of think about this. A career is never straightforward. It's always going around. You have the right for error. You can actually take decisions, say, oh, that wasn't so good, and go back and do something else. And I think curiosity is really a major driver that can get you where you want. I'm still a stern believer into the fact that if you really have a goal that you want to be in 5 or 10 years, you will be able to achieve that. It's just a question of kind of putting the energy in there and circumventing some of the obstacles and trying to go around if you can't go and move them out of the way. But I'm pretty convinced that if you have a dream, you can make your dream come true. So I leave it with this. I think there will be more opportunities to go into details in the questions later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Couldn't agree more on curiosity and remaining curious throughout your career. That's fantastic. Finally, let's turn to Fernando. We'd like to ask you a little bit about your background, your work now, and sort of your career path that got you to your current role with the University of Foreigners.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks, Christine, Caly. I've been really glad to receive this invitation, bring my experience. My name is Fernando Arardi. I'm a professor of hydrology. I do work from research to also solution-oriented, like technology transfer and studies for solving water, climate, and environmental challenges. That's my field of study. And working on a transatlantic context. First of all, let me say I feel also partially like home today, even for remote, because I'm also affiliated to the Institute of Environment of FIU. And I've been collaborating, going back and forth between Italy, where I live, Europe, my major continent of work, but also the US for the last 12 years. So I think I met Christine, it was more than 10 years ago. So a bit of myself, I think, but, without like a self bio sketch, but like trying to fit the topic of the workshop. I graduated in civil engineering with a major in hydraulics in 2000 from Sapienza University of Rome. And I was lucky enough to be awarded like a grant to come to study at Columbia University in New York, doing, water studies like I'm still doing now. And I was about to start a PhD in the US. I was really feeling home in New York, and we're very glad to work in the US. And September 11th came. So FEMA fundings for my program, I was, my major interest was, and it's still like floods or other natural disasters. And the FEMA programs for international students like me were cut because of the September 11th. I'm not, again, like telling the story just for saying, because if you connect the dots, this is how the world, works, also impacted my career. We live in a global world in which an event, in that specific case, it was the driving mechanism, putting me back in Europe because of that specific, unexpected control event. And it's still like, again, what I would say, connecting the dots happening today. After 20 years, we live, we work, in which the regional context, even the continental context, cannot have all the pieces of the puzzle. We are now facing, as a European expert, we have been working hard on the European Green Deal to make the transition toward green, and green energy, and also there is a green and energy transition that is still like a big push. And then the war in Ukraine came, changing the game. I'm not going into this geopolitical content, but just for saying how we all know, as an expert in the field of from policy to technical challenges. So I didn't introduce myself specifically, but I'm more also, I heard to the colleagues working on policy. I'm a quantitative engineering. I do work for supporting technical solutions that work for solving the challenges. That's my specific, expertise. And so in my work, you cannot lose the global framework. Even if you work on regional context, we all know we need to work on global challenges, and then find solutions that are driven by the global principles, like the green energy transition, like the European Green Deal, sharing my experience from the European side, but then has to be applied to solving specific issues that are multidisciplinary, because you have to fit the global principle into the regional context in which the culture, the history, is not only the engineering, the culture is different. So leaving this other piece of the presentation for sharing my view on this, my contribution to this workshop. I'm the director of the Waterdock Center. It's a multidisciplinary center in which engineering couple and work in synergy with humanities, so that the solutions are not only technologically sound, but are also adhering to the cultural and social context. So, in this short contribution, I would like to share in the transatlantic context we are discussing today, thanks to the European Center led by Christine Caly at FIU, that what I share my experience. I've been working between Italy and the US a lot. I didn't complete the story because then I started a doctoral program in Rome in 2002, after the year after September 11th. And I never lose touch with the US. And then I was awarded another grant from MIT. I work on MIT as a PhD scholar at MIT for 3 years, working on Katrina, for example, as a flood expert in that years. So I was lucky enough, and I wanted to share my experience, to value my experience, so that I've been now in the recent years really involved into supporting people, younger people than me, to do these dual programs. At FIU, we started a dual PhD program in which students do 2 years in Europe, 2 years in the US, and then they got a dual degree, dual PhD degree. So what I basically did myself without the dual certificate is now a real platform for students from bridging the 2 continents. And it's not a result I'm sharing because I'm proud of this, that we have been working with FIU colleagues for solving the technical, financial fundings for this program. Is the way to go for creating next generation engineers, next generation policymakers to cross the bridges, to work in the 2 continents, so that the global to local, or the glocal, like some of us say, are really operational for solving the global challenges, as well as dealing with the local cultural setting. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fernando. And I think what you were saying leads into, I think, how we want to start this discussion. I'd like to start with a bit of a big picture discussion. We'll drill into some other topics throughout the next 45 minutes. But I think given the topic here, the future of work in a transatlantic context, and in particular, some of the areas of focus that are listed after that: public health, science, environment, automation, artificial intelligence. I'm curious to get everybody's thoughts on general trends, both globally and within your own country or your areas of focus, and how those are impacting these fields. For example, I think given the state of the world in the pandemic, research and policy around public health is more important than ever. But given the various economic issues that are facing the world today, access to resources can be more difficult than ever. So I'd like to get your thoughts on how research and policy in your particular field and within your region of focus has changed in recent years, and maybe how you see these trends continuing for the months and years to come. Let's start maybe, Fernando, I think you were kind of discussing this a little bit just now, so maybe we could return to you to continue emphasizing this, and then we'll go around to the other panelists.
Yeah, and thank you for giving the floor again. On this technical part, I'm glad to be able to emphasize this. So we are talking about technical solutions. We have technology, and then we need to make sure that we never miss the point that technology is going to work, is going to be received, is going to be understood by citizens. And when I say citizens, I'm talking about from policymakers to the farmer. I'm dealing with water issues now. We have been dealing with the droughts, as in Colorado, also in Italy. So we need to make sure that the cultural component is always considered. Otherwise, the technology advances are moving so fast that the society doesn't receive it. These citizen-driven indicators have been stressed as a European expert in the Horizon program. Is the major multi-billion funding programs for research and applied research and technology transfer in Europe. As we have been discussing, how do we make sure all the programs we found are making this principle always operational? So we use the citizen always as an indicator. Every dollar, every euro we spend has to be somehow quantified how in terms of real increased safety, health, and better life for citizens. when I say citizens, I mean stakeholders, I mean water managers, to policymakers, and etc. So without going too long in my comment, artificial intelligence, I see this as a tremendous technological advances we are facing. Is there, is already here in terms of availability of technology, but it's really not only important because of the capacity to empower humans to solve the challenges, but also because it's the technology that is more interfaced by the human component. So it's already mixing the two pieces of culture and hard sciences that are needed to move ahead for a better society. So I would like to bring this point in the conversation, because artificial intelligence not only because it involves the policy aspects, the ethical aspects, the gender aspects, but because it's already, I would like to call it the perfect playground for being really and operationally transdisciplinary.
Excellent, thank you for that. And Peter, let's turn to you with a similar question. Representing policy on behalf of the EU, but also operating in the US. How do you see these kind of global trends or trends within the EU and the US impacting these fields in the transatlantic context?
I really want to sort of right now go after Fernando, because I think what he said was very, very important. If you look at the macroeconomic figures, the productivity gain we have in Europe and the United States since the 90s is very, very little, abysmal small. So one could quite easily make the argument saying that whatever we have done the last 30 years in terms of technology mostly has actually had very little impact on us today. We are not necessarily richer. We are not necessarily having a better functioning world. So I think the next generation or younger people also need sort of to question a little bit that what we have done the last 30 years. For me personally, it was a huge disappointment. When I grew up, I was watching the Jetsons, and I was as a boy believing, there will be all sort of smart stuff around it. Nothing of that has ever emerged. I do get the point, like artificial intelligence, it's a technology we can master very well today. But what we have not mastered is to get many of the technologies we have into widespread at-scale use at zero cost, essentially making them a commodity. We have not managed that. Everything is still very expensive. Think about cloud computing. It's a very, very expensive proposition, which kind of works, but there's a lot of technical challenges remaining. So I think we also need to question where we are to a certain extent. Not necessarily with a negative attitude, but the questioning, opening up sort of new solutions, new avenues, people thinking a bit bigger than maybe we have been thinking the last 30 years.
I think that's an excellent point. And I'd like to get Jeffrey's perspective on this, as representing a global organization that has been really at the forefront of these technologies for decades. Jeffrey, how do you view kind of Peter's thoughts on this, and how do you view the kind of shifting landscape in this transatlantic context?
Yeah. Well, for speaking in a personal capacity, I think that there's a lot of debate going on right now in Washington, but also in the European Union, elsewhere around the world, about the importance of reshoring production of new technologies and reshoring basic research and development. There's this discussion of a technology-driven Cold War that's emerging here. There's also this focus on workforce development and what we can do to train students up so that they can be so that these technologies can be developed within national borders. I think that from my own personal perspective, it's impossible to develop these technical solutions in a vacuum. That's why IBM has 350,000 employees around the world, and I think 130 countries around the world at last count. So I think that you definitely need technical expertise, but increasingly you need knowledge of how the technical solution is applied in the real world, so that you can chart its application, right? So as technologies grow more and more complex, the demand for students that have international experience and know how to navigate intercultural contexts will only balloon further. So I don't see the development of new technologies happening in a vacuum at all. You're increasingly going to have to combine your knowledge of a technical solution with your ability to unpack it and its international context. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific point. Matthias, let's turn to you as somebody who's so hands-on with an institute where a lot of new technologies are being researched and developed. How do you see this issue, and how do you view sort of the changing landscape of your sector in this transatlantic context?
I'm sorry. I'm convinced that you're all right. Of course, there has to be more translation from the basic curiosity-driven science that Max Planck and many others do into society. And I think there are ongoing kind of efforts from governments and also the international transatlantic activities to make that happen. So scientists that in the past were working somehow in their ivory tower and trying to communicate amongst themselves the great results that we have achieved. And I'm actually honestly not 100% agreeing that we didn't bring a lot of inventions to the world. I think we did. We did not maybe manage to transition them into society correctly. So I think we have a lot of gain of knowledge, but that knowledge has not been made available to society in the right way. And that's something I think for the career of future scientists, communication and interaction with society becomes way more important than in the past. So the specialist role of a scientist, I think, is a thing of the past. You have to have your scientific technical expertise, but you have to be able to communicate that. You have to be able to interface that with companies, with the business sector, and trying to really generate additional value for the society itself. And that, I think that's what we see shifting in the research area a lot. Even for Max Planck, who was for the longest time saying, yeah, okay, we are the pure blue sky research and we care only about curiosity-driven science. Even us, the government and the science minister in Germany comes down and says, listen, but you have to kind of make sure that your science and your research results get translated and make efforts into that direction. So I think that's certainly something in terms of the career development of the next generation of scientists. They'll have to be a broader spectrum of skills. And that's something I can anyway only encourage people. In my job, I think everything is needed. You don't need to be a specialist in anything particular, but you need to know a lot of details about a lot of different things. And the more you know, the broader your spectrum is, the more employable you actually are. So that's something I didn't initially know when I did my career. I also thought you have to be super expert in one thing, and that's why people hire you. But in the end, I found out actually people hire you much better if you have a lot of skills. Like in my case, for example, I've done building construction as a student. That was the most valuable thing that I've ever had in any of my jobs, because in every single one, I had to do building construction, including here in Florida. I have to fight with air conditions and how to get stable temperatures in a climate that has 95% humidity. This is things you don't learn as a biologist, but it's absolutely required in this kind of very, very interdisciplinary job. So interdisciplinarity and being able to connect sectors. We're talking about AI. We have been working with AI in the neuroscience context as well. But you know, I can't hire AI geeks because they're all paid by Google and Microsoft and IBM fortunes that the academic science doesn't have. So we went in and we started to kind of engage with 16-year-old students, the ones that are the game hackers and said, hey, listen, why don't you come and work with us and actually start to develop AI-based image analysis tools? And it was a very successful program. We have like, I don't know, 5 students, undergrads, they published 3 papers already after like working for 1.5 years with us on developing new methodologies that our scientists alone wouldn't have been able to do that. So this connection of connecting different fields, I think, is another very important aspect.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that actually leads nicely into one of the questions that we had wanted to address during the session. Of course, we have a lot of students tuned in from across the U.S. So I think I'd like to jump into sort of what you were just talking about in terms of, you know, how can students when they're thinking about their careers, how can they best prepare themselves for the jobs that they're interested in? And I know that we've talked. You know, Peter, you started off talking about, you know, having a variety of experiences, and Matthias, you were talking about, you know, having different backgrounds in education. Jeffrey mentioned seizing, you know, various internship opportunities when they come up. So I'd like to get each of your thoughts on how students can best prepare themselves and develop the skills that they'll need for their future work, especially understanding that, you know, the nature of work itself is kind of changing. You know, in real time. Peter, can you start us off on that?
Let me give you some personal experience. When in the earlier parts of my career, I was working as an engineer, and I used to be pretty good in mathematics in those days. And it was a shocking experience to work with quite a number of colleagues who were questioning basic progress in science. Even, I mean, I was working, in fact, for a semiconductor company. There were a lot of physicists. I mean, people would have thought, you know, with whom I don't have to argue that 1 and 1 is 2, you know, so that we would have baselines in terms of shared knowledge, shared understanding. It was a revealing experience to me that actually wasn't the case. And that's even less the case in multinational environments. This is, I think, when people go out and work in other parts of the world, what they will learn is a certain level of resilience, of building yourself a confidence, a resilience to deal with issues you were not prepared to deal with. And I wasn't prepared to deal with that 1 and 1 is not 2. So there was a lot of sort of going back, building trust, building common baselines, building understanding. So I think still people today will have to spend, as an engineer, you will have to spend a lot of time in understanding what environment you're in, understanding the people around you, and trying to figure out how best to work with them. What is the baseline I have to work with these people? And it's difficult. I think personally, I make often wrong assumptions, and then I'm always surprised. And that keeps on actually happening to me the last 30 years. So I'm not sure if anybody has found a recipe for fixing that. But I would like sort of just to leave it at that and say, you know, working with other people is complicated, and developing tools, mechanisms, insights, ways of dealing with that is I think, a good idea.
I think that's an excellent point. And Fernando, looking at your background and your bio, it seems like you've certainly worked with a lot of different organizations and have had to maybe convene a lot of different groups in the way that Peter is saying. Can you talk a little bit about you know, the various skills that or backgrounds that students should consider developing based on your experience and what you've seen in your work for their future careers?
Yeah, you know, always you know, trying to focus, you know, my experience, you know, in the water, environmental, climate, you know, that's really now a broad topic, because we are, you know, of course, interfacing energy issues and many other issues that are related to all the components of the economy. You know, basically try to make the story short. Like, we use natural resources. We need to deal with this. So the sustainability sector. And let me put a focus again now, starting from a recent you know, discussion about artificial intelligence. In this moment, technology again is really moving fast. Let me kind of say too fast. We are able to be, technologically speaking, full electric, maybe, but there are other components that we need to discuss. We are maybe we are also able to be more moving towards autonomous processes, that from logistics and vehicles to also medicine, health, and others. So I think in this moment, the technology sector is the major source of news and the major source of you know, new jobs, you know, new opportunities, but also the major source of challenges from the social component, because we are transitioning to a new opportunities, and maybe the job market is also challenged, because you cannot move that fast, changing and removing jobs that fast. So I would like to share my experience in which I see technology as a major, again, source of opportunities and challenges, in which not only we need to prepare the next generation of professionals for allowing them to make profits, to value the technology world, but all the other components, ethics, policies, laws. So to move ahead, not only for the digital, green, and energy transition, but to move ahead for making our life safer, healthier, more prosperous, so we live better. We need to, take the technology sector as a much broader sector, as respect to what we are used to. In which, again, I want to focus on all the pieces of knowledge, again, from policies, laws to, as to be moved ahead as a whole, not the one piece move ahead and the other one will stay behind. So that's my view from the European programs we are designing and implementing, in which if we see an amazing program like demonstrating we can move ahead better, faster, safer, with a big technological push, if they don't consider the social, ethical, gender dimension, if they don't consider all the components, we think it's feasible, we think it's great, but it's missing a big piece.
Great. So it sounds like there's consensus around really having a diverse educational background, policy, ethics, in addition to the hard science skills that students develop during their studies. Jeffrey, as sort of our representative from the private sector, does IBM kind of concur with that concept, or when you're looking at new hires, especially for your work in both in policy and in AI development, cloud computing development? Are you looking for that kind of diverse background within new hires?
Yeah, I think we are. And, just building on the comments that others have made, I wanted to call out three, pieces of advice in particular. The first is, as others have mentioned, is a sense of intellectual curiosity. I think that as a student, there's sometimes a tendency to focus on one class or one skill, mastering that class, mastering that skill, because you think that it will land you a job or an internship or something like that. But I think what really would be useful is exposing your brain to as many different experiences and domains as possible, especially within the sheltered environment of a master's program or a bachelor's program. But even more importantly, the more that you expose yourself to different experiences and domains, it allows you to find connections that will land you a job, your first job perhaps, but then perhaps more importantly, will provide a basis for a successful career. The second piece of advice that I would have is just be flexible. Peter talked about the importance of projects, and no one ever hires you to do a job. They hire you to do projects, and each job is a succession of projects, and you have to be able to hop from one of those projects to another all the time. And your employer won't hear that. They won't want to hear that you don't want to work on something, and you're going to have to learn how to chain projects together. And the way that you do that is by being flexible and good-natured and going with the flow. And then finally, probably the most important piece of advice that I give students at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In fact, they were just in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago for their annual visit to D.C. was, be willing to take chances and make bets on experiences that don't necessarily have a payoff, this month or 6 months from now, but take chances on classes, international, travel, things that you wouldn't think would have anything to do with landing a job, because you'll be able to stitch those together and impress someone that's conducting an interview.
I think that's fantastic advice. Yeah, remaining curious and open to experiences, I think, is so important. So we have a question from the audience, and again, I'd like to encourage all of our participants who are on today to feel free to share any questions you have in the chat function or the Q&A function. So the question is, and I think this ties into a broader question that I was hoping to address. Question is, how do you manage the time zone differences when you're working remote on a different continent? And I think what this ties into is the general idea of the future of transatlantic work. So given the developments in remote work and you know, using Zoom and online platforms to work more interconnectedly, but even though we've been at home over the last 2 years, you know, how is the nature of work changing, and how have you managed that? How has your organization managed that? How has it impacted the work that you're doing? So Matthias, maybe we can start with you on that question.
I'm obviously in that situation since 10 years because I have to work with the Germans basically every day. And so I think a typical day, yeah, you start getting up, and I think COVID has facilitated this because you don't even have to get kind of situated. You can just take your coffee, sit down on the couch, and then start to work transatlantic with Germany in the early time zone. And then I work the rest of my day with the Floridians, and then in the evening with the Californians. So I think it's you just kind of put your day into different parts, and in between you can do stuff like exercising or, I don't know, having lunch. I think the time during COVID made that much easier, actually, because before you had to rush, you had to have the feeling to rush into the office at the right time to catch that call at 8 o'clock in the morning with Munich. Now I actually don't try to do this anymore. I just say, guys, I'm sitting at home and do my Zoom from home. And so I think it has become easier to do that transatlantic part. But getting to this transatlantic thing, I would actually like to encourage students even more. I think to take that risk that the other panelists have also mentioned. But going abroad, even if you don't really know whether it's going to be a success story or not, I think it's always a rich experience. And in any case, you gain something. And I've seen a lot of Americans that went over. We had a lot of students that come to Max Planck in Florida, and then they realize, wow, this is an interesting German company. Let's go to the German side of it, and then bridge over the transatlantic, go to a German Max Planck Institute. And all of them found that kind of step very enriching, even though they didn't speak German. I didn't speak French when I did my PhD in France, and I didn't speak Portuguese when I landed in Portugal. So I think this is all things that if you're bold enough to do that, it's a fantastic enrichment of an experience. And that brings me to that one thing that I would like to also stress, people skills, like people interaction is, I think, the most important thing that you can learn in your career. The fact part, okay, everybody can learn the equations for the engineers or the science part. But I think getting networking and people interactions going, I think that's the most important. But I think something to learn if you move around in a new environment, because you have to learn new people, you have to understand different cultures. You have, and that's the value. I think that also brings a lot of value to the market, to an employer. If you have worked on both sides of the Atlantic, you can actually translate intercultural differences, and they are certainly there. It's not something that's completely self-evident. So that's something I'd really encourage students to do. That not all of them dare to take this step, but I think it's a really good thing to do.
Absolutely, I would agree with you 100%. Fernando, let's turn to you with this question of the changing nature of work, remote work in the transatlantic context.
Yeah, the changing nature, or the, sorry if I got the question right, or the time difference, or both? You want to?
Both would be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because actually, I really a bit again on my comment on the time difference, because it's very nice that Zoom technology, I said, addressing right in the question from the system, and then moving to the changing nature. Time difference, first of all, it's 9 p.m. here. I'm in Italy. I'm actually also working in a hotel, so I'm likely moving. And I think on the time difference, while I do believe that respecting the office time, that you never need to work nighttime as a practice, because you need to connect with other countries. I think of course, exceptions like this one. For me, it's a joy. I really love my job, and connecting with you 9 p.m. It's a pleasure. And technology allows this because I'm comfortable in my home and connecting with you. So respecting the ethics of the standard time, I think collaborative cloud-based online work that in post-COVID era now is really moving ahead, and everyone is making the choice of taking this chance or not. Going back to the offices of work for remote is a great value, is a great push on the transatlantic interconnections, because you can work across the time differences, valuing the collaborative work. You work in the cloud, you share your data, information in the works that are like maybe brain work, like these kind of services that we do, from science to business. I think time difference, it's a challenge because you need, again, to respect the ethics, the working operations, but a great opportunity for working better together. So sorry for going back to that comment. On how the work is changing, I would just rephrase what I just said for the time difference. In the post-COVID era, technology is empowering us with amazing opportunities. I keep seeing more and more companies, the new companies, let's say even large ones, the big startups coming up, in which they offer jobs running time zones. We look for an engineer this time zone. The company is in the cloud because they're working, the people are not cloud people, they're working operationally, but the company is already organized to work across time differences, across different technologies, and again, sorry to repeat this, across different cultures. Because when you want to be global, you need a business developer in Europe because you want to grow your business there. So you can just really, empowered by technology, value your intercontinental business, and that's how the work is changing, in which you have your skills, you have your region, you are part of the global picture, but you are a big piece of value for some specific knowledge and culture in your, in the place also where you want to live. Many people may move back to your country because they can do it now working from remote. So that's for me how the world is changing, again, connecting through technology different pieces of the world and moving ahead together.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's there's certainly a lot to be said for being excited about your work and working across time zones, but also finding the right balance and following the proper protocols. Peter, let's turn to you with this question. How do you view any challenges in terms of working across time zones, and how do you see the nature of transatlantic work changing?
Yeah. I can agree largely to what has been said, and particularly like Matthias, I work as well into -6 hours to one direction and +3 hours the other direction. So that's the way these sort of things are. People will have to get used to it. We'll have to figure out how that is working, building that into a family life, building that into a meaningful work life. So I think that can work, and that's probably providing actually a lot of flexibility. The point I want to make, the only single point I want to make, is that most likely we'll all be working in a sort of hybrid environment. So we will meet people in meetings. We will have a place where we can go to, which we may call an office. We will spend a lot of time working from other places. That is going to be the future, quite clearly. But I do not want to underestimate the advantage of interacting with people in person. If you look, for instance, just my own organization, I mean, who gets promoted? Who is the questions about visibility of your work, visibility of your abilities you have. You don't just get promoted because you have done your work. I mean, that's what you get paid for. So there are broader questions around sort of building a career which will require a meaningful in-person interaction with your organization, with your managers, with people who you would like to interact. And that will take time and effort, and people need to make the effort to come to the office. And I actually see that sort of a bit in my own organization being battled out That's in Brussels. I mean, there are large parts of Brussels are working now 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. Is it working? Is it not working? I don't know yet, frankly speaking. We will have to evaluate that a couple of years down the line. So I'm all for it because it works for my personal case, but I'm not entirely sure whether we have found the cruising speed for society and economy on that.
Excellent. I think that's a great perspective on that topic. Jeffrey, let's turn to you. With a global company, I'm sure you have teams working in time zones around the world. How do you see the challenges of working across time zones, and also how is IBM taking these challenges head on as remote work develops?
Yeah, it certainly has been a challenge in my own work. I work not only with colleagues in the European Union, but increasingly in places like Japan and Indonesia, which is completely on the other side of the world. So holding a lot of calls at 6 and 7 at night in Washington would be 6 or 7 in the morning there. So, but I think that it really cuts to the importance of time management. Being culturally sensitive to when others have their family life and when they start their day and end their day, and trying to plan calls around that. And in order to do that, sometimes, especially when it's a busy day, you have to know how to manage your schedule. You have to know how to manage your time. But then to the points that some of the others made about the importance of in-person interaction, I do think that I was hired during COVID, actually at the height of COVID, and I'd been remote for about 1.5 years of my job. And at first, I was invited back into the office in DC for 1 or 2 days a week, and it was great to finally, meet my colleagues that I'd been on calls with and developed, camaraderie with them. But then, now that the world has opened back up or is opening back up, there are really a lot of opportunities to travel abroad for short stints of time, whether that's 2 weeks or a month or 3 months, to work with those teams in other countries. And so, from my point of view, I think that that's one of the exhilarating things about working at IBM is they give you the opportunity to travel abroad and to meet teams that are normally dispersed, because they understand the value of having that in-person connection. And it's an in-person connection with a team internal to your organization, but it's also equally important to get to know clients and those outside of the organization as well. And that can be done to a certain extent. You can lay the groundwork through Zoom, but at a certain point, it does make sense to take a trip. And so if there are students here that have been remote for the past 1.5 years or 2 years or something, I'd really encourage everyone to take a trip and to actually meet the people that you've been on Zoom with.
Yeah, I think professionals and students alike can agree that there's a lot of value in having that in-person experience. So I know we're bumping up on our time here, but I want to give each of the panelists one last chance to give us a closing thought. I'm going to ask each of you to answer just very quickly, 2 or 3 essential qualities that students should have in mind to have a successful career in high-tech scientific research, emerging technologies, or environmental organizations, either in Europe or the US. And I know we've talked about a few of those already, but I'd like to get your kind of closing thoughts on that. And then finally, are you looking for interns at all? So Matthias, can we start with you?
Yeah, so I think when I already mentioned that the 3 keywords for me, I think, are to be curious, to believe in yourself, and to take risks. And in terms of internship, yeah, we have not really an internship program. We have what is called a post-baccalaureate program that gives students after the bachelor's degree the opportunity to either work for 1 or 2 years in research and actually beef up their CV, decide whether research is the right thing for them to do, or then get into PhD programs if they want, or use it to get into an MD PhD program. So those ones are open every year, and everybody interested can just go on our website, Max Planck Florida, mpfi.org, and look for a post-bac program. So
fantastic, thank you. Fernando, same question to you.
Yes, thanks. So like I said before, also when I was sharing my experience, my professional life experience, I'm also agreeing with the colleague Matthias. Be curious, take risk, and looking for opportunities to work on these transatlantic contexts. in Europe, they are full of opportunities for financing, not only moving across European countries, but also for coming from the US to Europe to work, to study and work. Along the same line, from Europe, from Italy, from my country, and other countries, they are full of opportunities for coming to study, work, do research in the US. So that's why I'm very glad that the center, like FIU Center of Excellence, led by Christine, is a perfect place when you can knock on the door and ask Christine, how can I go and work, to Italy or Europe, maybe with Fernando. So I'm also like to announce that we have open position at the Institute of Environment of FIU and in my university for dual degree PhD students. We're actually looking for PhD students willing to work 2 years in Europe, 2 years in the US, and then get 2 PhD diplomas because we transfer the credits. And this is already a big agreement we have. And like us, these dual programs at the master level and PhD level, and also at the faculty level are here. So just knock on our doors, talk to Christine, come to me, because the opportunities are here. So I do suggest to work on these bilateral or multilateral projects.
Great, that sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Thank you. Jeffrey, let's turn the question to you. Your closing thoughts, and are you offering internships?
Yeah, so my 3 qualities kind of stack on what I said earlier. So the first is intellectually curious, will enable you to find connections and patterns between concepts and ideas that others will not, that others cannot. Second, I think that Peter or someone else said, it's important to market and show the work that you're doing. So for some people, that could be starting a blog. For others, it could be doing a LinkedIn post. For some, it might be starting a YouTube channel. Create some way to show people the work that you're doing and communicating that. I think it's incredibly important. I don't do this well myself, but this is an area of improvement for myself in 2022, 2023. And then third, the importance of being interdisciplinary, flexible, is incredibly important too. And then when it comes to offering internships, unfortunately, I can't recruit interns in my current position. It's one of the quirks that comes along with being in a multinational company with 350,000 people and a HR bureaucracy. But anyone that wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, I'm happy, if with one caveat, to try to find an internship or a job for you in Washington or somewhere else. I would just ask that you give me an elevator pitch of 3 to 4 sentences on what you would like to do. That's very, very clear. But happy to talk with anyone on this call to help them, network through or think through what they'd like to do next after as they enter the job market. So,
thank you for that. That's very generous of you, Jeffrey. Thank you. And I'm right there with you. I think I could definitely do a better job of promoting my own projects and successes on social media. But Peter, let's give you the last word. Your kind of your ideal qualities for students pursuing careers, and are you offering any internships?
Yeah. Adding one more thing to do. So I think students must be overwhelmed by now with all the demands from our side. I think it's stamina. I just wanted to add that this ability and desire to act. There is no traffic jam on the extra mile, as they say. So people who are willing to walk that will always be in a unique position. Internships, yes, we actually just opened the next call for the next crop of 12 interns we are recruiting. So we have twice a year a class of 12 here in Washington in our delegation. They are all paid internships. So I would highly encourage anybody who is interested to have a quick look what we are offering. We're offering different disciplines. So I'm sure there is something for everybody there. And 12 is quite a number of people. So I think the office is not that big. We are around 70 people here. So I think this is a major part of our operations, the interns.
Fantastic. And I like what you said, there's no traffic jam on the extra mile. Well, we're just about out of time. I think we could keep going for quite a while longer. Thank you all for your expertise. While we're talking about the internship topic, I'll also share a little plug for my organization, Venture for America. If any of our students are interested in pursuing entrepreneurial pursuits after they graduate, I encourage you to check out our program. We provide resources and infrastructure through fellowship programs for graduating students to eventually develop their own startups and entrepreneurial projects. So Christine, thank you again for the invitation to moderate this discussion. It was fascinating. Thank you to our panelists. And Christine, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for our distinguished panelists. Yeah, we'll add something else. You are a great person. You are humble. You are passionate. And you didn't write this. Me, I write, of course, flexibility, curiosity, be flexible, interdisciplinary. But if you don't have the passion and if you don't like what you do, you can do anything, you know. So you have all this, and I would like to thank you really much today, and for your expertise, your advice, your kindness, for your time as well, because it was not easy with our tropical storm today, and you were here, and you are the best example for our students. Thank you so much. We know with the European delegation of the European Union, we have internships, so I will forward some information to our students, of course. And I really enjoyed this panel. Thank you so much. Before we go, I would like to ask you, please fill out a brief survey that the European Commission has asked us to complete. Please use the QR code, which appears just on your right here. And it would be wonderful if you can do that. We look forward to seeing you at our next events at the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. And our website is miamieuc.fiu.edu. So please follow us, and you will find many information about Europe, about internships, and on our social media as well. And we are in the emerging technology as well, with the clouds and everything. So we try to follow all this. For your information, our next events will take place in person, because we try to do hybrid to come back to the university. And on November 15th, so we will have at the same time at 2 p.m. We will have something different with the Meet EU event. We are going to welcome a winning award young EU filmmaker in residence, Vida Skerk from Croatia, who will present her film Night Ride. And we will have something else in December on our last virtual conversation on Europe, on the state of democracy in Europe. Thank you again. I wish you all the best, and you were really, we are really thankful and grateful that you were in this panel today. In the meantime, I wish you a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.